So with that, I'm Todd Skopic. I'm the building science manager for the Northeast. And with me today is Mark Bruton. And Mark is a technical sales director, has been involved with this chemistry for what, 20 years, Mark?
At least.
At least. We're not gonna date that question. So anyway, so both Mark and I are going to be co-presenting. And with that, I'm just going to go forward here, hopefully. We should have practiced this going forward. Seems like my system is locked up. Interesting. Not ideal. Well, oh, there we go. So today's presentation is on how cold fluid applied waterproofing systems using an instant setting membrane solve problems. We had a little bit more room to make that title a little bit longer, but it's probably long enough. So this technology is not new. It's been around since the mid-90s. So this is a project list, condensed, consolidated. There's over 3 million square feet of successfully installed projects. So the Henry Company got involved with this around 2017 through an acquisition of a company in Fairfield, New Jersey called TQ3. So since 2017, I think June, it's been a Henry Company. So again, this is not new. And as you can see, there's been some pretty prestigious projects done, just running through this, Carnegie Hall, which we'll talk about, the National Security Administration headquarters. I mean, how much more important can you get than that? I think we've installed about 500,000 square feet at the NSA headquarters. There's that Chrysler building, pretty iconic there. Georgetown University. We'll talk a little bit about the vessel and the culture shed there at Hudson Yards in New York City. And then really going from Europe to Metro New York centric to coast to coast essentially. So this technology has been around for quite some time, and the Henry Company got involved back in 2017. So this is our mission statement, and I like to boil it down because it's a little bit long. And I just say the Henry Company, we keep the outside out and the inside in from a thermal and air, moisture, and water. I mean, keeping water out of your structure is, the most important thing. So that's what we're talking about today. So in addition to, the roofing and the waterproofing that we'll be discussing today, a lot of people know us as the air barrier solutions provider with air barrier systems, but really the company got started back in the early 1930s being a roofing and waterproofing manufacturer solutions provider. So we have quite a history there. This is accredited by AIA, so we can't talk about the products, etc. So both Mark and I have our contact information at the end of the presentation. So please reach out to us for additional questions that you don't ask today. So, waterproofing, right? And I'm not exactly sure who all is on this call, but it's a very involved topic. And I usually start off by saying, waterproofing is really managing risk. To what degree do you want to keep water out of your structure, right? So if it's a simple, parking structure and the owner doesn't mind, some caustic water dripping on cars and ruining paint jobs, that's one degree of risk. If it's something like the National Security Administration, where top secret, very important, systems are that you want to make sure that, you want to make sure that you keep dry, there's different degrees of managing risk, right? And with all these systems, there's complex detailing required. And the devil's in the details. So you can, usually the field is not as big of an issue unless you have movement in that deck, etc. Some of these systems, waterproofing systems, take longer to install. They take longer for the concrete to cure, 28 days, 60 days, and that slows projects down. And ask any general contractor, do you want to take longer waiting until the waterproofing is installed? And the answer is no, of course. So, and some waterproofing systems are soft. And even though you put a layer of protection on them, they still can get torn up by other trades. So that's a problem. And then there's the occupant health and safety concerns with open flames and hot materials, solvents, VOCs, strong odors. No one really wants those on their project sites. And then there's life cycle costs, right? There's the initial cost, but then how long is the system going to remain in place and perform without having to remove the overburden, tear up the system, and stuff it in a landfill, right? So it's that whole cradle to cradle analysis. And of course, a lot of people on the call probably want to know about warranties and exclusions and overburden. So we'll be touching on that as well. So the learning objectives are basically the evolution of cold fluid applied waterproofing systems using instant setting membrane, the system buildup and the components and the technical characteristics, understanding how these components are installed. That's very important. And then the design and installation considerations, and then a little bit of a comparative analysis. So I think with that, we're going to periodically throw up a question for you, the audience, to respond to. So here's question number 1. Do you specify the following on Prodeq or IRMA inverted roof membrane assemblies? And you can pick multiple, right? So just whatever you personally specify on Prodeq. Looks like we're getting some answers. Thank you. Wow, this is cool. There's a fair amount of hot rubberized asphalt, still a viable technology for sure. And okay, well, thank you for those answers to that question. And then with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Bruton. Take it away, Mark.
Thanks, Todd. And thanks for joining us, everyone. Todd, if you go to the next slide, then please.
There you go.
So as you can see, the title of this presentation is talking about generically cold fluid applied waterproofing systems. We hope the interesting part to you is that it's using this instant setting membrane. And again, I'll try to keep the talk down to a minimum because we really think the photos and especially the video will speak to it for itself and you'll find it interesting. Generically, why these systems were developed in the first place. They started in Germany in the early 80s. That's a lot of innovative technology does happen. And it was developed for the bridge deck waterproofing market. These photos here, some of you may recognize. On the left, that's the Lions Gate Bridge in Canada. And on the right, that's the Isle of Skye Bridge in Scotland. If there's anything I'd like you to take away from this course and remembering about this type of technology is these 3 things about it. These types of systems really have an incredible installation speed. They're very durable when on site, more durable than any other conventional waterproofing, and they last longer, and they usually come with a longer warranty. That's the reason why they're out there, and that's the reason why they become popular, because you can imagine on a bridge, all waterproofing is important, but when you waterproof a bridge deck, you've got politicians involved. So they want that thing done because they need the bridge. It has to take a beating while they're doing the work on the bridge. That Isle of Skye on the right there, you can see it was waterproofed, and it was maybe 2 years later until the actual asphalt road was put on. And they want the waterproofing to last a long time. They do not want to have to take up a road to re-waterproof a bridge. Next slide. So we brought these things over in the late 1990s to the United States, and they were used, as you can see here, generically, again, for Prodeq, split slabs, any kind of protective membrane roofing. And they were specified and used selectively, admittedly, for projects where someone said, we need something done quickly. While that waterproofing is in place, it's going to take a beating. And once it's covered, we want it to last a long time. You can see there's a typical, and we have many more, Manhattan picture there of a construction site. Next. So again, as we're trying to point out, with these types of systems, you are speeding up the construction program, and we'll touch on how that works. You get short and long-term durability. It's durable while the construction is going on, and it's durable after everyone's left. And it lasts a long time, and it comes with a long warranty that usually supports that. Some other parts about it that are important is there's no extra flashing or detailing accessories required. I think we all know when things are going to go wrong with waterproofing, it's usually those are the areas where you're going to have a problem. And again, for green roofs, it's quite unique that it has the German FLL approval. We'll touch on that again. You don't need to have an extra root barrier to protect it from roots. Next slide.
So I think at this point, we're going to have another question. We're going to transition to another question. Let's see, why is the membrane bright green? Very good question. There are multiple answers that are correct. The first one is not one of those answers. It is about the same color as Shrek, ironically, but has nothing to do with that. It has to do with being very sustainable, long lasting, and it has an integrated root inhibitor. So as Mark mentioned, you don't need an additional root inhibitor. So with that, we're going to talk about the actual system buildup. So it's a pretty straightforward system. Really, I mean, there's 3 parts, 1, 2, 3. How complex is that, right? And actually the third part is optional and doesn't even need to be installed all the time. So we're going to go over each one of these components in a little bit more detail, but essentially there's an epoxy primer, there's a spray applied waterproofing membrane, and then there's an optional wear coat, and then there's an optional color stabilizing top coat that would go on that. So in this diagram, which is a vegetative roof, you really wouldn't need that wear coat unless, for instance, the membrane was going to be exposed for a long time. They were going to be driving, front end loaders. If they were going to be using a front end loader to move the growing media from one side of the site to the other, yeah, you would need the wear coat at that point. But say shortly after the membrane was put down, the extruded polystyrene was going to be installed. Well, that would be your protection. So no wear coat would be needed. So again, that's why it's optional. So we're going to go over each one of these in a little bit more detail. So first is the primer, and typically we're waterproofing concrete. So we're going to be priming the concrete, and that of course seals the concrete. It also provides a nice substrate for the membrane to adhere to. So once the primer is put down, then a full broadcast of sand to refusal. So basically you're putting sand down until the primer can't hold anymore and the excess primer is being removed. So here's a picture of an emergency room, of a hospital entrance where it was primed, the sand was put down, and that can be exposed for a while, depending on the circumstances. Obviously, if it's an emergency entrance to a hospital, they're not going to leave it exposed for a while. They're going to want to get that covered up ASAP, but it can be exposed for a while. The standard primer uses a certain sieve size of aggregate, which actually ties in to the thickness of the application. So I'll just go ahead and throw that out there. So, we're going to talk about the membrane going down at 100 mils. Well, that plays into the aggregate, the sieve size of the aggregate. So once you can't see the aggregate, you're pretty much assured to have that 100 mils of membrane in the field. Provides practical, so that's some of the aspects of the standard primer. Now there are other primers. So there's a low temperature epoxy primer. We're going down to 40 degrees. There's also a low viscosity epoxy primer. And this is an accelerated project schedule where the membrane is going to be installed on the primer within 24 hours. So sometimes that may come into play. Of course, on projects, there's pipe penetrations and things like that. So there's a PMMA, or a polymethyl methacrylate primer. So if you were on the presentation last week with Shane and I, we talked about the PMMAs, and basically the surface prep for penetrations, metal and plastic. So that you would be using there. There's also a moisture mitigating primer that follows or conforms with the ASTM F3010, which is a very rigorous standard for the resilient flooring industry, because as you're aware, flooring is very susceptible to moisture driving concrete. So basically, this complies with that standard for green concrete as soon as 5 days after the concrete's placed. So it's a really good system for condensing that construction cycle from a typical 28 days cure time on structural weight concrete to 5 days. And then as an option, sort of like a primer, is a modified bitumen cap sheet. Not exactly a primer per se, but the initial coat. So say you had a deck that had contamination with asphalt, but you could torch down or use a self-adhered mod bit cap sheet and then install the system on that. Or you could install a modified bitumen cap sheet, and that could service as a short-term roof before installing the system on. So those are all priming and surface treatment options. You can see a picture there of the freshly coated primer going down. And
Todd, there was a video there on that previous slide. If you don't mind, please showing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
At the bottom.
Yeah, so sorry. So this is a video, thank you, Mark, of the, so the membrane basically comes in the standard green or also gray. So so here they're installing the membrane right on a modified bitumen cap sheet. So sorry for skipping over that. So on to the membrane, it's 100% solids polyurethane hybrid. And it's fully bonded to the deck. There's no seams, there's no, it'll elongate, a nice elongation over cracks, little bridge cracks. It has high tensile strength and hardness. There's no fabric reinforcement needed. There's no detailing. So you'll see all this in the upcoming. 300% elongation. The tensile strength exceeds 1600 PSI. It conforms with the ASTM standard for bridging cracks at 1/8 of an inch. And as Mark pointed out, it conforms with the German Landscape Society FLL guidelines as being its own root barrier. So when you're thinking about a green roof, think about the green membrane. And then the optional wear coat is basically 100% solids polyurethane that gets put down on the deck. An aggregate gets broadcast into it to rejection, and it's great for heavy construction traffic. You can also bond mortar, tile, a concrete topping slab, macadam asphalt, all directly to that. So it comes in a standard gray. And then another picture here of a couple scenarios. So that top picture there is in Philadelphia at the Sierra Center. Look at all that equipment and items being staged on that membrane. So if it was a softer membrane, you would just tear it up. But this system with the wear coat withstood all that staging area. And then here, the lower picture, building a little curved wall right onto that sanded wear coat. So it does come in optional colors, or there's the color stabilizing top coat. So if you've got areas like penetrations that are going to be exposed above the overburden, if you've got parapets and curbs that are going to be exposed, there's standard colors. You can also do custom colors. So you can see this in upcoming pictures. So I think we're going to have another polling question at this point. Another question for the audience, I believe. We had that one, yes. The next question why is this technology so well suited for green roofing? As in vegetative roofing. Looks like we have some smart people in the audience, Mark. They're going right for that all the above, because it is robust hydrostatic resistance, zero VOCs, and it's its own root barrier. It's the ideal product for a green vegetative roof. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Mark. Mark?
Thanks, Todd. So this section, we're talking about how the components you're seeing are installed. And again, we'll have some video and some photos that hopefully will make it a lot more interesting and clear to you. But just in general, you can see from the detail there, it involves, as we talk about, a primer. And we've had a few questions on what we do on various scenarios. So we have different primers depending on what's left on the deck and the condition of the deck. Then we have where we pre-stripe with the membrane. And again, we'll see all these with the videos coming up, all the details with this instant setting membrane. Then we apply the field membrane, and then we have these optional wear coats. Again, the real advantage herein, back to what I was saying about the speed, is that when you pre-stripe or you spray, the detailing issues that are usually labor intensive and slow, where you have to saw cut, caulk, do other things like this, with this instant setting membrane, you pre-stripe. As soon as it sets, instantly you go on to it again. So it doesn't slow things down. But again, we have video to speed that up. Next, Todd. So again, with our epoxy primers, it's just like everything you'd be familiar with. You have to have the deck clean. And here we have a two-part 100% solids epoxy primer. This primer, if you go to the next slide, please, Todd. This primer is very thick. If you could start that video, you'll see it. It's a very thick, viscous epoxy. It's not thin. It's not like water. Hopefully you can see that in the front of the squeegee, which is back rolled into the deck. And it has to be thick enough so that it can hold the sand aggregate we're going to broadcast into it later. This you might find of interest. This is the new Yankee Stadium, or it was the new Yankee Stadium when he did it. So there's the sand being broadcast into the epoxy, and then the excess is removed later. We'll get to that later. And we didn't, okay, thanks.
Oh, you want me to go back?
No, that's fine, Todd, thank you. So the next part of it, and again, we have videos to show this, is the spray machinery. We'll touch on this in much more detail later. The important thing is what you're looking at here is probably, with all the bells and whistles and everything else that's needed, is about $100,000 investment in these machines. And the way they work is they're what's called a plural component machine. You have two drums, an A and a B, a red and a blue drum. You can see the hoses there. These machines proportion the material. They heat it up so it can go down the lines as fluid, and the material doesn't mix until it's in the gun at the very end. So it, because of the way it sets, if it's set any sooner, the lines would clog up, and the spray gun would clog. Next, please. You go ahead, Todd. There's a video. So here's a typical example of what these machines can do. Again, and you can see here we have two machines. There's one in that truck, and there's one out there. And you can see the drums separately. The material goes down the lines to these guns, and they are spraying it. And we'll have some better video showing. Now, the important thing about this one, Todd, is the video still going, Todd? Or?
Well, it's about to end. I thought you might want to discuss the primer that was used and the color of the membrane.
Well, okay. So if you just continue with the video, Todd, the important thing about this kind of a project is you'll see there's the primer we talked about, as Todd mentioned, and then there's spraying. Now here, I have no great explanation. Normally the membrane is green. We color it green. For some reason, this was black. It's probably what we had in stock. But the important point to make here is the GC on this job thought he was going to use a traditional hand-applied fleece reinforced type of waterproofing. And I think it allowed about 3 weeks in his program to have this waterproofing done. And with this type of a technology, it was done in a day. Okay. So again, we'll have some video. Todd, is that just a photo? If we just
Well, it's just a photo at this point. The video is coming
Okay.
up.
So again, so the idea for all the detailing in that, the way it's applied is you just pre-stripe things like drains and cracks and upstands with 40 mils of this membrane because it sets instantly. Then you drop back and you spray over it again. So there's a huge, huge labor saving. And I think the video will make it self-evident. The next slide. So this is Carnegie Hall, we may have mentioned. It was a very interesting project where they were taking the roof off Carnegie Hall, and the GC knew he needed some kind of a waterproofing that could be done quickly, could take the abuse of staging on it for over a year while they put a new roof on Carnegie Hall. So he's standing, this gentleman's standing on the sanded epoxy. You can see he's looked at the cracks in the deck. He sprayed it with the membrane for the 40 mils pre-stripe. Now when he sprays the entire deck at 100 mils, he overlaps those stripes and effectively you have 140 mils on the detail. The video's in a way not doing it justice, but it just shows you how quick it is. So as soon as he's spraying that, he could literally nearly walk into it. It sets that quickly. Okay, Tom. And there you can see the machine setting it down. And this is another, you go ahead, Tom. Again, this person's working sort of backwards on it, but you'll see here that drain, that detail, again, typical for standard waterproofing, is quite labor intensive and difficult to deal with. You'll see when he sprays it here. He sprays it with a pre-stripe of 40 mils. We just don't have the video when he goes back over it again with the other 100 mils, but you'll see how quickly this is detailed. So it's completely seamless and it's already waterproof. And you can see the labor saving there, the huge, huge labor saving in the speed. This is for the NYPD at one of their riot headquarters in Queens. This was a split slab. It was about a 70,000 square foot project split slab. They had over 100 of these stanchions there, and the specifier who knew this technology knew how long and labor intensive that would be to detail that with, again, your standard waterproofing options. And because of the speed of this, you can see hopefully there, when he sprays it, you can effectively see the bolt heads because that's how fast it cures. It doesn't run down off them. You can see somewhere with the camera, and we'd invite any of you, if you find this technology interesting and we're in your neighborhood, we always get architects and people who want, and engineers who want to come out to site to see the technology for themselves. So another great advantage, as we all know, with waterproofing is everyone's always worried about things like laps, welds, seams. That's where we're going to get our leaks. This is absolutely seamless. This was Bushwick in the Gardens. This is a green roof. It was done in phases. It was, I think it was about 17,000 square feet. It was done in 7 phases because the GC couldn't get his act together and give the whole area free. The beauty of it is, though, is when this kind of a membrane is sprayed, it's completely seamless. And again, this is another option. This is a water retention tank. This is Georgetown University. And again, you can see here, there's 3 machines on this project. And with your typical waterproofing technologies, that is a nightmare for anyone. All of that kind of detailing, especially for something that's going to hold water all the time. And the speed of this instant setting membrane and detailing with all that amounts to huge labor savings. And one more, again, just showing a bulkhead that, again, with your typical, he is standing on the sanded epoxy, you'll see there, and Todd will touch on that more again, and then spraying the membrane.
I found it interesting how he does not spray himself into a corner. He does appear to be spraying himself into a box, but he steps off the ladder and then sprays back onto the deck.
I'm going to, Todd, I have a couple questions here. best for me to probably answer. People are asking about how do we guarantee this thickness of 40 mils or 100 mils. Very important. I don't know if we touched on it. There's a couple things. Really, the truth is now there are all kinds of infrared meters to measure those kinds of things. But one of the practical ways of doing it is the sand that we specify in the epoxy primer is of a certain size. And when you no longer see that sand profile, it is just a practical on-site way of seeing that you have 100 mils of that membrane. But if that's not a good enough for people, because again, you can't do a dry film thickness because it sets too quickly. So you just have to take readings.
Is there another question that you want to address now? Or save it?
No, fine, Todd. I'll just answer them if we move on. Thanks. So again, this is Carnegie Hall. You can see how tough that membrane is. The gentleman applying the final optional wear coat in this case actually has spiked shoes on, so he's not damaging the waterproofing, the membrane. And this is your more traditional two-part polyurethane, roller applied with an aggregate further on, put it in, and that's what takes the wear. No extra type of a protection board has to be specified with these types of waterproofing. This video is just to indicate again, the whole system is VOC compliant, low odor, so it can be used in areas where there's a lot of people around or living, because there won't be any issues that way. And again, we'll get sometimes, the issue is people do not like the look of the green membrane. People may find this interesting. This is Far Rockaway after Sandy, and that wall had nearly been destroyed by Sandy, and it was just really, quite frankly, held together with this type of a technology, but the client didn't want the green membrane. So a top coat, there's an optional color top coat that can be put on. And as we always say, with these types of systems, you can have a top coat, any color you want, as long as it's gray. Thanks, Tom.
So we're going to have another question, I think, for the audience. What surface prep needs to be done to perform on new concrete? We've not quite addressed that topic yet. Was there a different question we have at this time, perhaps? We have a 100% answer, or yeah. So we haven't gotten quite to the surface prep, but whoever answered shot blast, that's a great answer. So we're gonna move on here to some design and installation considerations. Thank you, Mark. Typical substrates. Oh, well, we have the. We're gonna move on here. We haven't gotten into surface prep yet. So the typical construction substrates that were going on, we already talked about concrete, any kind of metal, as long as there's no forming oils on the metal, PVC pipes, etc. They need to be abraded, then they need to be cleaned and primed. As far as exterior grade sheathing, always prefer cement board, but we can go on other substrates as well. CMU, masonry, brick, precast, and we also talked about the SPS modified granule cap sheets. Those are all viable options for substrate. Oh, and here's a picture of a deck in New York City. There's different penetrations, etc., and different things being detailed in these pictures. So as far as surface prep and the concrete curing, structural weight concrete, 2,500 PSI. We're going to want 28 days on that. It's also important to have low moisture in the concrete, so really less than 6% moisture. As far as curing compounds, sodium silicate plays nice with this, but no oils or resins, things like that. Several manufacturers have this type of more technical information on their website. So if there's time later, I'll show you where on the website this information is. but there's a number of different technical bulletins on some of these more technical topics. As far as the surface profile, the International Concrete Repair Institute, or ICRI, or some people call it ICRI, we want a CSP, a concrete surface profile of 3 or 4. The 1 or 2 is just too smooth. There's not enough surface for the epoxy primer and the membrane to bite to. We can go on a CSP of 5, but they're just going to be lower yield of the membrane. The contractor is going to end up using too much of the membrane. So we don't want latents on the concrete. That's that milky residue that sometimes dries on the surface of concrete. If you have latents, that needs to be removed. But if you get a nice broom or wood float finish without latents, you can go on the concrete that way as well. So as far as different ways to achieve this surface profile, etc., either shot blast or mechanically grind. We don't want any acid etching. We don't want any pressure, hydroblasting, none of that. So basically, if it's a metal pipe penetration or a bunch of metal bolts or steel, you're going to want to needle scale that or shot blast it, grind it, something. As a matter of fact, as far as bolts and whatnot, this is, we haven't really talked about it, but this is the culture shed up at Hudson Yards. So the giant wheels are rolling on those tracks, and this membrane was used in the trough there of that track over all those bolt heads and whatnot. So as far as the surface prep, you're going to want to remove any sharp edges, mechanically abrade, clean, prime, and basically very similar with the plastic PVC pipe penetrations. We can tie into expansion joints. We have a relationship with one of the large national expansion joint manufacturers. We could actually offer a single source warranty with our membrane and their expansion joint. So it would be installed right to the gland of the expansion joint, of course, not covering it. So there's another polling question. It may have popped up earlier, and I apologize for the difficult coordination here with these questions, but maybe we'll get that question or not. What surface prep needs to be performed on new concrete? So there is the question. I like that answer. Shot blast. When in doubt, shot blast. Very good. Appreciate everyone's participation. Thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing. Oops. So now there's now Mark's going to cover some additional considerations that really show the strength of this system. Mark?
Thanks, Don. Just go to the next slide then.
Yeah.
So what we've learned over the time, quite a long time, and a lot of misery, is with this type of technology, there is always the consideration, the operation and maintenance of these machines. So it's really become apparent that for this type of technology, a manufacturer's on-site service is really what's required to ensure that this technology works, is good, and as fast as it's intended to do. So when considering this type of technology, you should always try to make sure you're dealing with a manufacturer who has some kind of a on-site tech service to make sure those machines that you're seeing in the videos, and hopefully they'll have a couple more, are working properly. Because if the machines aren't working properly, everything we've been talking to you about today falls apart. If they are working properly, you're getting everything we're talking about. You're getting the absolute speed on a construction program that you want from it. Next, please, son. Just to give you an indication, if you look at that, and hopefully you'll be able to see, that is the gun that sprays when you see people spraying. And down below, Todd, if you can just put the cursor over that little opening on the side there, Hopefully everyone can see that very small hole on the side of that module, and there's one on the other side. Those big 55-gallon drums you see, the material in those coming down the line comes out in each one of those holes on either side of the gun and mixes in the gun.
Yep.
And that's what allows you to spray something that sets instantly or nearly instantly, because it comes out of there, hits whatever you're trying to waterproof, and then it becomes waterproof instantly. If it was designed any other way, you would have a gun that would seize up. So again, the technology is fantastic for what it does, but the supervision and the technical support from a manufacturer with this type of technology should matter to you as much as the technology itself. So, Todd, I guess really I'd let you deal with the warranty, please.
Oh yeah, well basically there's different levels of warranties in the industry, and things are evolving, but basically there's the warranties you don't pay for, and there's the warranties that you pay for. And the old adage, you get what you pay for, is certainly true when it comes to warranties. So within our language, there's material warranties and there's system warranties. And system warranty, well, material warranties are just that, only warranting that the material is what it is when it ships from our warehouse or our location. The system warranty is a leak-free warranty that will provide the material and the labor to stop the leak. So there's really not much protection there. So there's another level of warranty that we call Gold Seal, that the important word here is workmanship. So my cursor's over that word, workmanship. Much different than labor. Workmanship is basically the installer being able to install the product properly. And again, as Mark noted, we have these field quality control people that come with the equipment. So when a contractor bids this work, they're bidding not only the product, but that comes with the equipment and a full-time field tech rep. So every day that the equipment is running, our field tech rep is present, and we can cover the workmanship for 20, 25 years and perhaps more. But and I think there's a little typo there. The cost for this level of warranty is really 10 cents per square foot per year, or $10 per square if you're in the roofing language. And certainly happy to talk to you more about the warranties and fees and things like that for another discussion. There's also some different technologies, or basically, we're also in the hot rubberized asphalt business, and it's still used. And as you saw, people responding to the question, hot rubberized asphalt is still certainly a viable option. Tried and true, been out there since 1967 for us. And is that true? Yeah, well, yeah, 1967. It was a good year. So basically, we're just comparing the thickness, the coverage per day, which was really an important consideration, because time is money, manpower, and man days are very critical. And when you can put down, and this is just a rough estimate, 4,500 square foot per day per machine with a crew of 5. And sometimes that can be much higher, sometimes it's less. So like that Georgetown University, the chiller, all those penetrations and pipes in the way, they had 2 spray machines in there. Very tough to get that kind of yield. But basically with the instant setting membrane, fully supervised. So that's a big advantage. Overburden can bond directly to, require special equipment. Yes, with the hot rubber, it's just a melter. So there's some differences there, and we feel for certain projects, there certainly is an advantage with the instant setting membrane. Mark, do you want to cover the summary? I'm sorry, it's tough to see the slide number. Was there another question we wanted to ask the audience? Oh, why is a manufacturer's on-site technician important when using a cold fluid applied instant setting waterproofing membrane? Good question. Oh, wow. We have some fast responders. The answer is all the above. You can multiple choice. But that really is the benefit. And then Mark, you want to bring us home, and then we'll do some additional questions and answer?
Sure, Todd. What's the next slide then, please?
Yep.
So again, we just want to summarize what I tried to hopefully make clear at the beginning of the presentation. The real advantage is this type of technology, again, is it's installed very fast. It doesn't matter how complicated the project is. That's a picture of a green roof in Seattle. Again, normally would be quite complicated to do with traditional waterproofing. It's safe to work with, as safe as anything, because there's no solvents, no hot materials or open flame, low VOC, and there's no strong odor. It lasts a long time, and it comes with a long warranty. And Todd, just to your point, it is a cent a square foot. So a 30-year warranty, normally for manufacturers, means it'd be a 30 cent per square foot a charge. Okay. Again, that you may have been pointed out, some of you may be familiar. This is the, so I'm just looking at the slide there. This is the, sorry, Todd?
The vessel.
Yes, the vessel, yes. So this is the vessel that we did over in Venice, as a matter of fact. Quite fascinating project. So just touching on here, reason why it was used, very fast, speed up the construction program. They wanted something that was going to last a long time, and they wanted something that was going to come with a long warranty. And again, this took an absolute beating while this vessel was being constructed on site. So it was waterproofed, took a beating for a year while it was put together, held up, and they didn't have to do any re-waterproofing with it.
I think that concludes the presentation. Of course, there's going to be some questions and answers, we're hoping. There's a number of questions and answers. I'm not able to see as a presenter what those additional questions are. So we do have a couple other people. We have a gentleman up in our Fairfield, New Jersey location, Paul, who's been also answering some questions. He's quite familiar with the technology, and Mark. Mark, did you want to share any of the questions that we can discuss online?
Just if I remember a few of them, again, there was the question about how we control the thickness. I think we touched on that, hopefully satisfactorily. People asked, and rightfully so, if there's overspray, what happens? And I was just trying to explain there that because the material sets near the membrane sets nearly instantly, you don't have the effect of like a paint where it's wet, lands on a surface, and then cures and dries, bonding onto the surface. It's usually like little balls of rubber that are still a bit damp, but they've already started to cure. So when they land on a surface, it usually just involves a strong brush to remove them. But there's no doubt about it. When working in Manhattan and using this type of technology, protection has to be in place.
So it looks like Rick Wagner has a question about the people being sensitized. Do you want to mention that?
Yes, they can. So again, Richard, we outline what PPE they should wear, and they have to cover their body. They have to wear a mask with a filter when they're doing it.
And then Liz says, what was the green roof project in Seattle that you showed?
It's called the Regatta. It was done so many years ago. I actually had hair then. I can't remember where it is, Liz. It's somewhere in Seattle. It's called the Regatta.
And let's see, I assume this is good for pedestal mount pavers. Now it is, but you'd want to use the wear coat with sand in the wear coat, and then you could put your pedestals directly to that.
Okay, just to clarify, Fred, you're correct there, but if you're talking to use the term pedestal mount pavers, You don't have to use the wear coat if you're using a pedestal. If you're mounting them where you're fixing the paver directly to the waterproofing, you need the sanded wear coat, providing a mechanical key for that. But with a pedestal paver, you don't require that. And yes, it is good for that. Just to touch on that, and that does remind me of an earlier question, Todd. The beauty of this technology is we have not come across an overburden that you can't use on this. And it doesn't affect the performance of it, and it doesn't affect the warranty. I'm sure many of you are familiar out there that if you use a certain type of waterproofing, sometimes you can be very limited to what you can put on top, either because you won't get a warranty or you're worried about damage to the waterproofing. That's not the case with this. Just to give an old story, bridge decks, this type of waterproofing, as I mentioned before, is used on bridge decks. There are examples in Germany and Europe where this waterproofing goes down and they lay rail lines directly on it. The big ballast that you see on a rail track, that goes down onto the waterproofing. They lay the sleepers and trains drive directly on it. That's how tough it is.
So then there's a question from David DiFilippo about blindside applications. I think I know the answer to that, but I'll let you.
No, go ahead, Todd. You probably know. Go ahead.
Well, no, it's not really intended for blindside applications.
Correct.
So, I mean, it's certainly not blindside, but if you had a mud slab with a broom finish on it, a suitable broom finish, you could waterproof the mud slab and then put your structural slab on top of that. So technically, that's blindside because it's below the slab, but that's really not going to be bonded to the structural slab. So there are better options for blindside, which we as the company are fast and feverishly working at coming up with a blindside solution, but it will most likely not be this technology, which is called Prodeq. And I think Mark's touched on the lifespan of the product.
Yeah, Ryan, these are interesting questions. It's actually quite interesting. Over in Europe, where these technologies are developed, they're intended to go on structures where the design life of the building is 100 years. Again, we'll never prove that until the time comes, but these type of technologies have now been around since, so we're coming on 40 years, and there are projects there where it's still down. Unlike other types of waterproofings out there, there's no organic content. So there is no reason this would break down over years when it's subjected to UV or water, all the things that traditional waterproofings are affected by. We would expect this to last that long. Now, no manufacturer can make that claim. We don't have the proof yet, but any type of accelerated weather testing, feedback from the chemists, there's no reason why this would ever degrade, and I don't know, or need to be removed. There's just no examples of that having happened yet.
And then Andrew has a good question about during or after construction, using the same material to patch, or do we have another system that we'd recommend to patch? Say you didn't want to have to bring the spray rig back to the site.
Yes, it's a good question. We probably, Andrew, should deal with that better in this presentation because it does happen. It just does happen. No matter how tough this is, we've had people with a magnesium torch cut through it, or something dropped on it from a great height, or people have to put in posts or something later on. So there are other technologies, types of waterproofing that are easily compatible with this, that the manufacturer, whoever makes, as a manufacturer, including ourselves, have something to patch it. So it's very simply patched. And again, it's seamless.
Oh, so it's a question from Matt here, as far as what kind of gauge would you recommend for testing the applied thickness, the dry film thickness, because you can't use a wet film gauge.
Yeah, there's these digital, Matt, I can't give the name offhand, to be honest, but you'll know there's digital film thickness gauges out there. They're quite common. There's a lot of the people out there, and any of those can be used.
And then what about sag? At what mil thickness, even though it is instant setting, I don't know if it would sag, but because it's instant setting, it really doesn't sag, unless I guess the guy was really just laying into it really close up.
That's workmanship, and it does sag, but really, normally, we're in the business of waterproofing, not the business of looking good. If that does matter, where it's exposed, the installer can be careful with numerous passes with the gun so that you don't get sags in it. But as the manufacturers, these type of materials aren't worried about that. It's really the thickness of the membrane that's going to do the protection. So that's what matters most.
Well, listen, I just wanted to thank everybody for their questions, and my contact information is here. Mark Bruton, basically mbruton@henry.com, and myself as well. I was just going to spend a minute, if this is going to allow me. I was going to show you where on the website the whoops.
Todd, could you show that video, Todd? Do you mind showing that video on the right?
Well, yeah, I could. Let me. I thought I could. Let me go back to the presentation. Sorry.
Just very quickly for everyone, you'll see that's, again, a typical building site, certainly a New York building site, showing how you can stage on this waterproofing material. That's why the GCs love it. And on the right is a video showing that membrane having just been sprayed about an hour before. The wear coat hadn't even been applied, but there was such pressure to get the work done. You can see them driving a front-end loader directly on the membrane while they're applying the waterproofing to the side here. You're going to see in a sec.
And again, that's the gray version of the membrane.
Yes.
Yeah, so what I was just going to show real quick, we have a wonderful website. Our webmaster and digital marketing people do a great job with this. And so you can either go, I can't see my hamburger now. Oh, there we go. So we can basically either go in to our website through commercial, residential, or roof restoration. This little 3 horizontal line we call affectionately known as the hamburger, not the Hamburglar, but the hamburger. So we have a wonderful waterproofing systems landing page, and from here you can go on to plaza decks, traffic coatings, green roofing, and below grade. So the system we've been talking about today is this typically green system called Prodeq. So the Prodeq information is all right there. You can scroll down, there's technical literature, there's specifications, there's details, there's the tech talks that discuss this, the lead declaration, and videos. So if you've not seen enough videos today, there's certainly more videos there on the website, on our YouTube channel, all those places you can get additional information. So I think we're right at the hour. Please, we have all the questions that people have asked. If we haven't gotten to any of the questions, either Mark, myself, Paul, local rep, someone will certainly follow up with you, and please let us know if we can help you out with one of your projects. So thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay healthy. Have a good rest of your day.